everybody, Dan Illman, Mike Beer, the DRF race of the day for Saturday, July the 29th, race number 10 at Saratoga. It's the Grade 2 $500,000 Jim Dandy, 3-year-olds going a mile and an eighth. Let's take a peek at this field. Please scan or click the QR code for Race of the Day access on mobile, which includes free Formulator Pass performances. And Mike, the Jim Dandy is, of course, the local prep for the Midsummer Derby, the all-important Grade 1 Travers. And it's an important race for Forte, the number 2, to sort of reassert his dominance over this division.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he does, Dan. Obviously, things haven't gone perfectly for this horse since he won his first 2 starts of the year. We did see him in the Belmont Stakes. He had a lot working against him there. I guess he ran okay in that race to get up for second, Dan. They're going to try blinkers here. Pletcher says, in an effort to sort of keep him more engaged in the running. We'll see how that works out for him. He's the horse to beat here.
We'll throw up the Timeform US pace projector for this race. The very lightly race, number 4, Saudi Crown, showed high speed going a 1-turn mile in the Grade 3 Dwyer last time out. He'll have to stretch out around 2 turns, but he does look like the controlling speed. It'll be interesting to see, how aggressive will they be aboard the 3 Hit Show? Manny Franco seemed to be aggressive in his last 2 races with this horse. That doesn't necessarily have to be his style. And B, will Forte be sort of keyed up with new blinkers?
Yeah, I guess that could be a real question for Forte. Forte's a very tactical horse, Dan, but they've never really gotten too aggressive with him early in his races. I mean, the more you look at this field, there's only 5 in here. Saudi Crown to me just looks like he almost has to be on the early lead in this race, and he may not have to go that fast, Dan. We'll see how much it helps him.
I like the way trainer Steve Asmussen's handled the number 1 Disarm. This is a son of Gunrunner who ran a fine 4th in the Kentucky Derby. They resisted the temptation to wheel back in 2 weeks in the Preakness. They decided a mile and a half in the Belmont was just a bridge too far at that point. Instead, they went to the Matt Winn at Ellis Park. They caught a sloppy track. They didn't catch a fast pace. They caught a decent horse at the wire named Verifying.
Yeah, I thought another nice step in the right direction for Disarm. He fired a good one to close down Verifying in that race at the end. I like the trip that he pulled in there, Dan, to stay a little closer to the pace. And I like that he still had a really strong finish in that race. You mentioned his Kentucky Derby. Overall, good trip in that race, but he had plenty of other things working against him that day. I thought all in all, he acquitted himself very well at a big price to be 4th. And I think there's, even more improvement still in this horse, Dan. If he can pull the right trip in this race, I think he could be there at the end.
I agree. He's very lightly raced, and he's just come up with his 2 fastest races. He could be a nice summer, fall 3-year-old, a horse peaking at just the right time. Forte is the number 2. Of course, he was the 2-year-old champion of 2022, winning the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and he rolled through his first 2 races in South Florida, the Fountain of Youth and the Florida Derby. He was going to be the favorite in the Derby. Well, he had a foot issue, and he scratched. Then he missed the Preakness. Here he is in the Belmont. This is a 10-week layoff for Forte, going a mile and a half, and he kind of ran in spots in this race, Mike. He was in contention on the back stretch, dropped out a little bit on the turn, and now he's going to keep on coming in the stretch, and he's rallying to get second behind Arcangelo, who saved all the ground.
Yeah, I think all those things you mentioned, Dan, are the reason the blinkers are coming on here, because he just sort of gave away position around the final turn here. You saw how much work he still had to do there as that field came into the upper stretch. He's very determined to get second in that race. And I put it that way because he finished up okay in that race, but it's not like he was flying at the end. He was just sort of making up ground gradually. It was a good performance. Obviously, things didn't go right for him leading up to that race. So for him just to get second, going a mile and a half, and to match his career top figure, I mean, that's all good stuff, Dan. He's still a really good horse. I still think he's the leader of this division at this point. But it's not like he doesn't have something to prove now. I think he really does have something to prove now. And this is the first race we're going to find out about him here.
Hit Show took the New York route to the Kentucky Derby, winning the Withers, then just being eked out in the Wood Memorial. In the Derby, he broke from the inside post. We all know the Derby had a very fast pace, and he was up close to it. And he ran okay to only be finished 5th, only be beaten less than 7 lengths. In the Belmont, it was a similar situation. The pace was solid. He was up close, and he was still punching along in that sort of scrum for second to finish in a dead heat for 4th with Angel of Empire.
Yeah, I mean, he's run fine in his last 2 starts. I thought he was a little underrated headed into the Triple Crown Series, Dan. I did not care for the ride that he got in the Kentucky Derby. I thought he actually ran pretty well in that race. Listen, he ran pretty well in the Belmont Stakes, too. I didn't think he had as much of an excuse in that race. He still ran on okay. He was still in the mix at the end of that race. He just wasn't quite good enough. I think dropping back to 9 furlongs helped this horse. I think he can get the right trip in this race. I just wonder if he's going to take another step forward here, Dan, because he's a horse who I think does have to take a step forward if he's going to win this race.
Saudi Crown, the number 4, is one of the big question marks in this race. It does appear like he could be the controlling speed, but he's going to be stretching out past a one-turn mile for the first time in his career, and this is only his 4th lifetime appearance. Now, he has ability. He won his first 2 starts sprinting impressively, and then he ran in a fast edition of the Dwyer last time out, where he is engaged in a virtual match race with Fort Bragg for the last 3/8 of a mile or so, and they went 22-2 for the opening quarter, 22 flat for the second quarter, and he's still punching on to finish second. You're at a 106 Beyer speed figure. Really, the key to this race is, can he stay the trip?
Yeah, it really is the key to the race. And listen, that pace projector that we showed at the Open, if that's how this thing plays out early, it'll go a long way towards helping this horse get this distance, Dan, if he doesn't have to go fast early. So we'll see how it all plays out. I can't knock what he's done in his first 3 starts. He's run really well, and all of them. He didn't have a big excuse last time, but that's a pretty good horse that beat him, and it came back a very fast race.
He is by Always Dreaming, who won the Kentucky Derby and has sort of been a fair sire thus far. Pedigree way back with some stamina. I think the 3rd dam was a horse that could win marathons on turf. Angel of Empire is the number 5. He rolled through the Risen Star in the Arkansas Derby. He ran an okay 3rd in the Kentucky Derby, benefiting from that fast pace and rolling on late. And then they put blinkers on for the Belmont. And trainer Brad Cox had said this horse always trains in blinkers. It's not that big of a deal. I think the trip hurt Angel of Empire more than anything else. He was basically wide around both turns.
Yeah, and maybe the blinkers on had something to do with that trip that he pulled that, because he really didn't settle early in that race like he had in his prior starts. He wound up going forward, getting caught on the outside, and it just didn't really work out for him. He ran fine in that race. His Derby was also okay. I didn't think he had some kind of big excuse there. More than anything else, Dan, and I can't say I'm Angel of Empire's biggest fan. He's one of the horses in here who I think dropping back to 9 furlongs could really help this horse. He just needs something to run at.
Before we take a look at our top selections, please click the subscribe button on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel for the latest DRF videos. Top pick time for the Jim Dandy. It's the prep for the Travers. Mike, you're going with Disarm. He just seems to be getting better and better with each start. And I'm not ready to pigeonhole him as just some one-run closer or a horse that can be close to the pace if the fractions are absolutely glacial. I think he can adapt.
I do too. I've never looked at him as a one-run closer, Dan. I've liked this horse from the start. I made no secret about that. I bet him in the Derby. I thought he ran fine in that race. And he's one of the horses in here who I really do think we may not have seen his best race yet, Dan. If he can improve one more time, he can be there. To me, he's a very fair price on the morning line.
And he also handled the Saratoga Strip last year at 2 in his 2nd lifetime start. I'm just hoping pace makes the race. I'm not sure how good Saudi Crown is, and I'm not sure how far he wants to go, but I think there's a good chance he gets to the front, backs this down, and while the big names are sort of eyeballing each other, maybe he sneaks away at a pretty decent price. We'll see if Forte can get back on the beam. Like Mike, I still think right now he's the leader of the division, but he's going to have to win the Jim Dandy to retain that spot. 1, 2, 3, 4 for Mike. 4, 2, 1, 5 for me. It's the Jim Dandy at the Spa on Saturday. Best of luck.